Dr. Catherine here from Alula. We are all about bringing to parents the most interesting, insightful conversations. We want to make parenting feel relatable, and really just give people as much support as they can. And one of the things that I often think is really important is to hear from other parents. Because often there is this sense of being a little bit siloed, or maybe having certain types of conversations and not the others, right? And so happily, we have Cassie Grimshaw, who has agreed to come on and have a chat with us all the way from Canada. So we're very privileged, woken up really early and sorted out all three kids. And she's here, bright and bushy-tailed and ready to have a chat. So Cassie, I'll pass it over to you. Maybe you could just say a little bit about yourself, and then we'll just get into our chat.
Okay. Hi, I'm Cassie, mom of three. I'd like to say four and under. And I primarily film our lives on TikTok, also on my Instagram, kind of sharing my experience of motherhood.
Amazing. So yeah, three under four, that's a
Yes,
handful.
yes.
Was that something you always kind of thought you would do, or was that just how it turned out?
Um, I always knew I wanted a lot of kids, and I kind of thought to myself like they would be close in age, maybe not this close, but then kind of with the snowball of COVID and I was already kind of out of work, and my husband got moved to work from home. So everything kind of lined up where I was like, honestly, like if there's a time to have a bunch of kids close in age, I feel like now would be the time. Our parents were also home. So we kind of had a lot more support than we would have had in a normal situation. And so yeah, we decided to just go boom, boom, boom and have the three, and we are done now.
You're done. Everyone always says
Yeah.
that. But okay. And I guess I was asking earlier, before we sort of started our recording, was just the sort of the what's your why for, for being on social media and documenting your journey and sharing that with other people.
Yeah, I started because I was home with my baby. I didn't have many friends that had kids, and I found a lot of support through the app. And I would go on and I would kind of just like look up anything like, baby rolling over or best brand of diapers. And I found like this new outlet for socializing that we weren't having at that time. I had my daughter January 2021, so like right in the height of COVID. Yeah, and so I wasn't really able to like go out and socialize with other moms. And then I thought to myself, like, wait, why don't I post on here? And so I kind of just started posting little videos or mom tips. And then it kind of just took off from there.
Amazing. And like that, for me, that's like really interesting. That and there's one of the sort of the whys, let's say, behind Alula was this idea that parents, we often have questions, right? And then obviously with the internet, we'll go to the internet and we'll look for information, we'll look for advice. I mean, how useful did you find? Because I noticed you said maybe you were one of the first in your friendship group to have a baby, right? So
Yeah,
I'd like to
yeah.
know what your experience was like, being a first time mom. Like maybe you had prior experience of children. Maybe was this your sort of your first deep dive into
Yeah.
being around
Um,
children?
so I was a Montessori teacher, so I was kind of thankfully well versed in children and childhood. I also nannied. I was an au pair in Australia. So I went into it knowing a lot about kids, but I was also surprised that like when I had my baby, I like joked that like my brain kind of turned into like not remembering anything logical. I was like, why are they doing this? It's like I kind of forgot. Or like maybe that was just me being their mom. I was like extra cautious with them. So I did find like the internet two ways, right? Like it can be super helpful and you can find a lot of information, but sometimes when you have access to large information, it can sometimes be a little worrying because when you Google something like baby spit up. And then next thing you know, there's like 5 articles about some like gastro issue that they're gonna have.
Yeah.
So I did find it very useful. Just I had to make sure I was also being realistic with my internet use and like maybe just looking for more like helpful tips and support versus like real, you know, type doctor information.
Yeah, and I think that that is often there's that balance, isn't there? There is the information that is useful and it helps, and then there's often that information that can really tip you over into kind of anxiety and panic.
Yeah.
And I know that's one of the things. I was watching a reel the other day by like a Esther Perel, and I think she was saying something about how parenting sometimes has become this very idealized thing, and we all have this way that we want to parent, and we sort of almost get locked into that. And as much as I obviously advocate for parenting and parenting advice, there is that sense of sometimes maybe we're losing confidence in what we know. And it's interesting, you were saying like even with all your experience and your history, I think sometimes when we arrive at the place of being a parent ourselves, it does change. And even if we have information, we're still questioning and doubting and unsure. So how did you
Yeah.
find your balance between maybe using the information you already had and the experience you already had, and then, the stuff that is out there? Because I guess we're also exposed to new things. The more you search and the more you look for stuff, the more you find out.
Yeah.
Um, so how do you maintain that balance for yourself?
I think it took me probably until I had my second when I realized like one, I wasn't going to parent every child the same because one, each child is different. And two, like even our daughters are only 16 months apart, our first two. But even within those 16 months, so much had happened, or I had learned so much more that obviously I had like had some different parenting techniques with her. And I just tried to remind myself, like, especially when I'm sharing online too, every situation is different, every child's different. What might be like the best parenting advice for one person might not be the best parenting advice for another. So I just always went into it with like the most information I have would be the most beneficial because I can talk to 10 people in a room and maybe only one of their advice is really going to help me. And so I just talk to as many people as I can. I read as many articles as I can. I kind of just collect as much data and just know that I have grace with myself. I'm never going to be 100% the best parent all the time. I try to, but
But I think I think that's just such an important. There are a couple of things that you said there, and I really echo with. One of them is giving yourself grace. This isn't about trying to be perfect, because there isn't such a thing, right, as a perfect parent.
yeah,
And almost that sense of parenting the child you have, as opposed to some idealized child, or sort of theoretical child. And I think that even in the literature, there's a sense
yeah,
of reading it and then trying to implement it. They're very, very different things, aren't they? So you can read, I don't know, like I remember when I had my
yeah,
first, as much as with all the training I had, I wasn't, I'd worked with parents and children in services, but obviously I'd never been around a newborn. And she just wouldn't sleep.
yeah,
I remember kind of reading these books and gradually getting to the point where I realized I was going to have to follow my child's rhythm. And there was one thing of trying to
yeah,
squeeze her into a nap at this time and a feed at this time, and then sort of starting to realize that they're useful frameworks, but you have to adapt them. And my first was very different to my
yeah,
second in so many different ways. And I think I love that, just that reminder that every child is different, you're going to parent differently. And even things like COVID, the fact that your first was born right in the thick of it. Did
yeah.
you do you think that it impacted much about your parenting journey or their experience as children developing?
I think I lucked out when she was around like 6 months old. I decided to start a stroller walking group in my neighborhood. And I was like, we can all like maintain a safe distance, but like still get out with our kids. And that really was like a turning point for me. The 6 months of her life were very difficult for me, like as a mom, because she did not sleep. She had really bad colic. She had really bad reflux. And it's not like, I could just go out and be like walking around a mall because malls weren't even open at that point. So I couldn't even just like get out into society. She was a January baby. And we live in Canada where it's like -30 outside. So I was just like going a bit stir crazy in my house. I was like, I need to do something and like meet other moms. And once I did that, I kind of realized we were all doing the same thing. It just looked a bit different. Like they were like, oh my God, my baby's up all night. Like they're not sleeping through the night either at 6 months. Cause I was also seeing all this stuff online being like, my 6-month-old sleeps 8 hours, a night. And mine was sleeping like not even 2.5 hours a
Yeah.
stretch. And so, but again, like I would be like, so at that point with my first, I wanted to be so perfect. And I would be, researching the best nighttime routines. And then I would, figure out exactly what I did the night before that would make her sleep that little bit longer. And then the next night, I would do every little thing to make it perfect again. And then, by the time I had my second, I was like, okay, no, like we're just going with the flow here. Like some babies just don't sleep. And unfortunately, like that's just, it is what it is. So
Yeah.
meeting other moms and them being like, no, like I'm going through that too. I was like, yes. Like it just
Yeah.
feels so much more validating in person, right? When you see another baby who's, healthy, who's growing, who's playing, and the mom's also like, oh my God, like they hate eating vegetables too. And you're like, really? Like, yay. So
Yeah.
that helped me a lot.
Yeah. No, I think there's definitely the putting things into context just has to be a part of all the information. It's interesting, like you're saying, with the Montessori approach and stuff, it is such a great approach. But it's again, how do you take that and how do you apply that to your own child and their developmental sort of stage and process. And so
Yeah.
something that I wanted to sort of ask is, as a parent to three, and I can imagine there's like lots of competing demands and maybe sometimes contradictory demands, like one's doing something and their
Yeah.
developmental ages are really sort of staggered, but I think you're in that phase that is very physical, it's very hands-on, you're there, you're like how do
Yeah.
you how do you manage, let's say, your own time, your own meet, your own. And I'm saying that like you have much of it, but do you make
Yeah.
time for yourself? Do you try and prioritize that? Or do you just not get any in reality? Like, what does that look like?
Um, so when I went into motherhood, I went in like with me and my husband both knowing that I always say like the plant that grows the house like can no longer grow if it's not fed, right? And so like we both knew from the get-go, like I am very self-care, self-time. Like I make sure that I am open when I need support. Like I'm not ashamed to be like when he gets home from work. The kids have been crazy. I'm going for a drive to get myself a crispy Coke from McDonald's and listen to some Taylor Swift, and I'll be back in an hour. Like I have no shame when it comes to that because that's the only way I have found I can be the best version of myself. And like I've started doing yoga one night a week and I've planned it after the kids go to bed, which kind of mitigates some mom guilt for me because I'm like, okay, at least like I'm there for bedtime, I help my husband, and then I can go kind of do something for me. And I have found that has helped a lot, just me as a mother and as a person to not just be mom, to
Yeah,
also be myself and, have time for myself and then, show up as mom and be able to be like refreshed and renewed and the best version. Because again, like 3 kids, 4 and under, like it is nonstop from the moment they wake up until the moment they go to bed. And again, it is very physically demanded, right? Like my youngest is only just turning 16 months. So she is like right in that prime time, like wants to be held, wants to be cuddled, but my 4-year-old also wants me to play Barbies with her. And then my 3-year-old is jumping off the top of the couch. Like it is mentally and physically nonstop. So I am not ashamed to be like, one time a year, me and my husband go on a couple only trip and we do a family trip. And I am not ashamed to be like, I need me time.
Yeah, yeah. And it's really interesting because I think there is that, I think there's often that sort of, there's a level of guilt, I think, about,
Yeah.
taking time out for yourself. I mean, I have to say, in all honesty, I was very bad at that. Like really, really
Yeah.
poor at making sure that I had time out for myself. Because there was always that sense of, okay, they always need something, and ideally they prefer to be around you, and that's
Yeah.
just how it goes. But then getting to the point where you realize as a parent, it's a necessity. It's not a nice to have. It's actually a necessity. Because, like you say, your own reserves just become so depleted.
Yeah.
It doesn't benefit anybody actually.
Yeah.
And I like, you know, the way you phrase that at the start. And then I guess the thing for me is, like, we talk a lot about emotion regulation as part of what we do, and the sort of the support I will give parents will be a lot about looking at things like, what your stress levels are, what your well-being is like, and how do you manage your own emotions when there are times when you feel really fraught and pulled, and then your kids ultimately they need you to regulate them, and you have to regulate yourself. How do you do it? Like, what's your...
It's definitely a work in progress, I will say, because my kids do get very dysregulated, and your like first response is you start getting, dysregulated because there's just a lot of feelings going on and a lot of noise. And the only thing I have found that works is either playing music, because that immediately takes my kids out of like any meltdown. Like if I blast like any type of Disney song specifically, like it is immediate switch flip and we just go full dance party. So that has helped a lot. Obviously, in every, scenario, you're not going to be able to play music. So it's not, an end all be all solution. Or we go for a car ride. I have found like just they enjoy it and I enjoy it because I'm not being needed in that moment, right? I'm not being touched. I'm able to just like regulate myself, but they're also, reading a book, doing whatever in their car seats. We go get a little snack from somewhere. We do a little lap around the neighborhood, and then we come back, and it's almost like everyone has just left it in the car, brand new day.
Yeah, yeah. I love that.
So,
I love how, we naturally sometimes we find these ways. And like, if I was to move that back into, like some of the tools and techniques we might teach, it's like changing scene, changing environmental cues, broadening
yeah,
our visual field. And like, you're naturally doing those things, by changing the stimulation. So it's like, okay, we play music instead of using words, and these sorts of things, they do help. But you're right, it's like a sort of trial and error, and then
yeah,
finding your thing. And I love the fact that you acknowledge the kind of the sensory part of regulating, because I know
yeah,
you talked about touch. For me, it's sound. Like, noise is a big stimulant for me. So if it's very noisy, I'm struggling. And so one of the first
yeah,
things I would do, and I still do, if things are getting a bit heated, I have to turn down volume. So if there's a TV on, it's going off.
yeah,
If there's music playing, it's going down. Because I know that if I don't do that, I can't, I struggle to get a grip, and then manage the situation. So I think that's the thing. And you said it's always a work in progress as well, because I think as your kids are developing and changing, their needs are changing, their demands are changing. So naturally, the pull on
yeah,
you is changing. And so you sort of, you always feel like you get to the place, and then you are like, okay, now I'm finding a new tool because I have to figure something else out. And one of the things you
yeah,
were saying, or you talk about on TikTok, is the fact that one of your children is on the autistic spectrum. Like,
yeah.
how did you guys discover it? And then, what's been your journey with that? Like, how does that play out in family dynamics?
Yeah. So I first noticed like that she probably wasn't developing on the same rate very young, like around 11 to 12 months. Um, but again, when you work with kids, I think it like puts a target on your back where like I was telling family members and they were like, you're just anxious. Like it's because you're with kids so much that like you're over analyzing every little thing she's doing. So I was like, okay, maybe I am like, where I was starting to like doubt myself. But I think deep down, like even at 11 months, I probably could see that, something was not developing right. And when she hit probably around, I think it was like 15 to 16 months, she like lost all speech. She like had this massive regression where like she stopped doing things she was doing before. She wasn't playing. She didn't have eye contact. Like she stopped saying mom, and we would call her name. We'd be like, Addison, Addison, and like she would never respond. So once it was like major, very obvious things, I think I was like, okay, like this is definitely getting somewhere now where it's not just little things like lining up toys or being really repetitive, like this was like losing words, no longer, holding like eye contact in conversations. And so that's kind of when my family was like, okay, yeah, like we think you're right. And during
Yeah.
that time too, it was so hard to get into doctors. It was, almost impossible to get an in-person appointment as well. And so we kind of went the private route with that. Also in Canada, like it is very hard to get we call it like a public assessment. Like it's unfortunate, but there's like years long wait list. And working with kids, I knew like early intervention, it shows a lot of progress and, success with that. And so I thought that was one of the things that was very important for us is I was like, okay, like I want to get her into, speech therapy and, behavior therapy and stuff now while she's so young still. So she was diagnosed before
Yeah.
she was even 2.
Amazing.
Um,
Okay. Yeah.
and now, I mean, she's 4.5 and she speaks 3 to 4 word sentences. She maintains eye contact. She responds to her name. Like we have seen a lot of success with her speech therapies, and other therapies. Obviously, like there's, other venues that we go down that we have a lot of difficulty with. Um, and so that is kind of what I share over on TikTok is like one, our government does not support autistic kids very well, unfortunately. Um, the school system I talk about a lot now that she's into kindergarten. And I kind of discuss that. And also like I focus a lot on the sibling aspect, right? When we first found out that she was autistic, we were pregnant with our second. And I never thought of like the sibling aspect until I gave birth and I had her sister. And Addison was very physical with her, but not out of aggression. She just didn't really know how to properly, engage with her. And it was just like a turning point, I think, for me that I was like, wait, like this isn't going to be like the typical sibling relationship that you always think about in your head, or maybe that like you've experienced with siblings. And so that's kind of when I picked up online sharing, is I was like, for people that were maybe pregnant or expecting or had an autistic child and were thinking about maybe having another child, I kind of started sharing like my thoughts on that and our experience with, bringing other children into the home.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's such an important one, isn't it? It's just how do we all relate to each other, and how do we
Yeah.
understand these differences? And when you're younger, yes, there's certain things like maybe the understanding about safety and touch and what's too much and what's okay. And then I guess as we get older, and then it's our children get older, there's that sort of how do they communicate, how do they kind of share and and bond with each other. how
Yeah.
like how how would you say your sort of your family is, I guess, learning how to respect each other's individuality? Because essentially that's what it is. Like we all have different
Yeah.
things, we all have things. Is
Yeah.
it something
I
you
think
communicate about?
Yeah, we definitely are very open. We also like all communicate. Like, I mean, I'm not on the spectrum, but I also have needs or, dislikes that I have as well. Same thing with her sisters. And so we're just very open being, right now, Addison doesn't like a lot of noise. And so we're going to respect that. And, maybe we'll move to a different spot, or she'll move to a different spot. And it doesn't always kind of have to be like this perfect situation, or even when it comes to trips or traveling, not every single thing is going to fit every single one of our needs, right? There's five of us, three kids, and all of these things aren't just going to go into a perfect line and everything's going to be this great, amazing experience. And sometimes we need to realize, like our daughter who's 3, she does not like certain things that Addison likes, right? Where Addison loves, boom, boom, boom all of the time. She's up here, full energy. And her sister Hallie's like the most chill human you've ever met in your life. Like she's just wants to be a couch potato some days. And, we have to respect that and we have to teach them that like you both have your individual wants. We don't always have to be together all the time. You guys don't always have to be playing all the time. But it's important to respect that and, each other's wants. And maybe, Hallie doesn't want to be touched. She doesn't want to be climbed on. She doesn't want to play Barbies right now. And, that's okay. And just trying to teach them. I mean, it's very hard because they're still pretty young, but, it's
Yeah,
not that she doesn't like you or doesn't want to play with you. It's just right now, that's not what she needs.
yeah, yeah.
So it's a work in
And I think
progress.
it is, right? And I think it's so important. But something I was going to say to you is maybe because of your background and your kind of like your training and your understanding, you were able to spot the signs earlier and sort of have a sense of what you thought might be going on. But I think for a lot of parents arriving at a place of, because it's a journey, isn't it? Like, first of all, you notice things, then you're kind of wondering, is
Yeah.
it just me? And then maybe there is sometimes that feeling of like a loss in a way, like a grieving, like it's not the journey I had in my mind and it looks different, all the
Yeah.
way to actually approaching professionals and going through a process to get a kind of like, an understanding of what's going on. And I think that is something, would you, I don't know, do people approach you on social and ask you like, do they ask advice? Do they sort of ask about your journey and sort of try and use it as a way to make sense of their own? What do you experience? Do you find people reaching out in that way?
Yeah, I do definitely have people ask me like maybe some signs I saw or, what I guess like people have called like red flags that I noticed in Addison when she was younger that kind of weren't like your atypical situation. And I do talk a lot about she uses a soother. And it is the only regulation method we have found to be successful with her. We have tried, we have exhausted all options in therapies. Like she does not want jewelry, she does not want anything. She is a oral sensory, wants to suck on a soother kid. And you know what? After trying to fight it for so long, her pediatrician, her therapist were like, just let the girl suck on her soother. Like, if this is what she needs right now and it's going to bring a situation from here down to here and allow her to be successful, then who's it harming, right? And so a lot of what I share is the adult comments and other kid comments that we get all the time, right? Like Addison doesn't care. She's sucking on her soother in the middle of Costco. She's the happiest person to exist. And then you always have somebody that comes up and they're like, "Oh, she's a little too old to have that, isn't she?" Um,
Yeah,
and so when I share things like that or frustrations, and I'm like, "How are we setting our children up to, succeed in life when they're seeing you constantly make remarks on a child that like you don't even know. It's a child in a grocery store and you think you have the right to go up and make a remark on something they have with your opinion, and then your child's going to see that and then ultimately think, yeah, okay, any soother that's, she should, only babies have soothers and that's how it develops. So I share that a lot, and I have gotten a lot of messages from people who say, either maybe their autistic child wears a bib and they get remarks on it all the time. Why are they wearing a bib? They don't need a bib. You're visually, marking them when they go out for people to ask questions. Like, I think there's just a lot of opinions people have. And so I've kind of formed this community of people where, you know, there's there's a niceness of knowing other people are getting the comments too. It's not just my child, which is unfortunate, but almost gives a little bit of relief because you're like, okay, it's not just me being singled out at Costco or wherever, at the park. But it's also unfortunate that that's kind of what we experience in this community is, remarks or little things made, or if she's hand flapping, they'll say, "Oh, why is she so excited?" Just little things like that that I did not think of prior to having an
Yeah.
autistic child, where I'm like, wow, people really go out into the world and say this to people. Like, it's just wild to me. It's
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah. And it is it's
So
one of those things where you stand back, and sometimes obviously because of what I do, I can spot, I'll spot certain kids behaving in particular ways, and I immediately like, oh, I think that, kid might be on the spectrum or a little hyperactive or
yeah,
but I think it's hard enough, you know, parenting is, tough enough.
yeah,
And I think that it can make it just that bit harder, or a lot harder actually, is the judgmental kind of behavior from other parents,
yeah,
or other public. And I think that's always something I wish that we would think twice before passing a judgment, and definitely passing a judgment out loud. One thing,
yeah,
think it in your head and keep it moving, but we don't need to kind of drill in and kind of say things and make comments and have an opinion that is often unfounded without any understanding of context and what's going on. And I always think, if you see a parent struggling, maybe rather than standing back and making a judgment, see if there's anything you can do to help. Like if they've got other kids around them and they need to focus on one, it's just trying to help them make sure the others are kind of okay and not running off. Or I think there's a lot of, I wish
yeah,
that we would change this approach to kind of, it is quite shaming, I think, of parents, like you're doing something wrong, like your situation isn't how
yeah,
I expect it to, so I need to tell you something about it.
yeah,
And I think it can also be hard for the siblings to hear this stuff, or the child themselves in the midst of this, to hear and be perceived in this way.
yeah,
This is quite interesting. Like you said, there is a community support. And I think that's why it is often actually really essential to have, this kind of support, because it
yeah,
doesn't make it feel better, but it's not just you. And I think
yeah,
that kind of normalizing is something that, other people go through as well, maybe helps you feel less isolated um, in
yeah.
your situation. So I have like some fun trigger round questions. We're gonna fire them at you. But the last thing I kind of wanted to do is also just like think about, just social media as a whole, and maybe your experience on there, sharing your experience. Um, it sounds like it's largely been a positive experience. Maybe that's an assumption, and I don't know if you're getting lashed back about some of the things you say and the views you have. I'm gathering you do. If you get it in person, you
Yeah.
probably get it online. Keyboard warriors. How do you
Yeah.
deal with that?
I try and just remind myself that I know what's best for me. I know what's best for my family, and it's not going to be what's best for everyone. And just like where I find things I don't like online, maybe I see something and I'm like, not for me. It's going to happen. Would I leave a nasty comment and say that on someone's page? No. Do people do that with me? Sometimes. And I just think to myself, they're not in my life. They're not in my circle. They don't bring me anything, any joy clearly that I need. And I just try to move past it and just remind myself that at the end of the day, like they're behind a screen. I don't know them, hopefully, in real life. They're not, gonna come up to me in public. I'm never gonna see them. And I just try to tell myself everyone has an opinion.
Yeah.
Nobody's gonna be 100% on you with every single thing you say. there's going to always be some disagreement. And thankfully, I haven't dealt with it a lot. But in the times I have dealt with it, I just delete it and move on.
Okay. Yeah. I think you have sounds like a very sort of robust, positive approach to it. So I think these things
Yeah.
they can be difficult to deal with. Okay.
Yeah. When
So
it's parenting, it does hurt a little bit. When they're coming for my parenting, I'm like, wait, that hurts my feelings. But
yes, because
yeah,
it's such a personal thing, and we put a lot of ourselves into it, and I think to
yeah,
be hearing from sometimes members of the family, sometimes, complete strangers, this kind of sense that, you're not doing it right. And I think it comes back to the point you were making about there isn't a perfect way. It's doing your best, right? It's
yeah,
always attempting to do the best you can with the information you have, and being sort of
yeah,
open and willing to adapt if you need to. And I think that is often the is the best we can do. I think even as professionals, and somebody has training and works with children yourself as well, you will know that as well from the experiences you've had outside of parenting. But it's hard to hold on to
yeah,
that when you're kind of the subject of that.
yeah.
So our quick fire round. It's you choose, and so don't take too long to think about the answers. We want the first thing that comes to mind. So morning routine chaos or bedtime chaos, which is harder?
Morning routine. I say that because you have places to go. So if like one little thing's thrown off or delayed, it's like a domino effect. And that adds to my anxiety even more because then I'm like, no, breakfast was only supposed to be 10 minutes. Now it's 20 minutes. Where bedtime, like I'm okay. If the kids are crazy, if they're late going to bed, like what's really gonna happen? They're gonna lose, an extra 30 minutes of sleep, maybe. It's definitely more
Yeah.
chill around here at bedtime.
Yeah, you're right. I think there's something about like having the other things we need to hit, whereas maybe bedtime is like, hey, they're going to bed later, and I guess if they're preschool, then it's like, well, we don't have to worry about getting up early in the morning to go to school, so we might be able to sort of run that on. But I think that often
Yeah.
makes things more intense when we've got something else to get to. Okay.
Yeah.
What's one snack you always keep in your bag?
Goldfish. Goldfish for the kids, sour Skittles for me.
I love that. I love that we put that part in there where you've got one for yourself and one for your kids. Okay, so messy
Yeah.
play or screen time, and be honest.
Uh, okay. As a mom of three, screen time. But as a mom of one, probably messy play. If I
I
have
love
all
how
three home, screen time.
I love how that changes as the numbers increase. It's like, okay, you know what? we can fudge the lines a little bit here. Um, a phrase your kids repeat back to you.
Well, I have very physically affectionate or just like physical kids in general. So I usually say like, where do our hands stay? And then they say on our body. And then they put their hands down because sometimes not everyone likes to be touched all the time. So
Yeah,
we
no,
do
that's
repeat that
a
a lot.
nice one. And one word your kids would use to describe you.
Probably hyper. I think, which is funny because I say my kids are hyper, but I do think I hype them up too much a little bit. I'm just very all the time. Go, go, go. Music playing, we're dancing around, we're out, we're at the zoo, we're at the mall, we're at the park. Like I'm a very hyper person.
So, yeah, I mean, there's that sort of energy and energetic sort of element that does come across. I mean, how much do you think that actually sort of helps you in raising three?
Yeah, it definitely, I think it helps me because I get like, on average, probably 4.5 hours of sleep a night, and I can accomplish 14 to 15 hours a day, no issues. I wake up in the
Wow.
morning, have myself a cup of coffee, and I'm go.
Oh,
So I
I,
do think sometimes when my friends tell me like I cannot survive without 8 hours of sleep, I'm thinking like I go to bed at like midnight, 1 a.m., and I'm up by 5:30,
that's
ready to
nuts.
go.
I feel like you need to bottle that and you'd sell it, you'd make millions for
Yeah, I'm
sure.
also pretty
Um,
young still, so I don't know. Maybe when I get older, it'll start to dwindle a bit. But
maybe yeah, I think there's definitely an element of like when you have your kids and how much element, but how much energy you have. But I think you sound like one of those people who just generally is pretty buoyant and has that energy
yeah,
to spend. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, it's been really amazing to chat and just it's nice to connect and hear about, your journey, but also, what it's like to parent three young kids, obviously one child. And it's interesting, your first child who is on the spectrum, and then just how you're adapting and creating a life that feels good for you and your family. And also just thinking about, what are some of the challenges that come, even in terms of accessing services, accessing support, what it's like to be out in public and sort of manage there. So Cassie, thank you so, so much. It's been such a
thank
pleasure to
you.
have you here, and I hope you've
Yes,
enjoyed the
thank
chat
you.
as well, hopefully.
I have.
And yeah, it'd be lovely to have you back at some point, maybe when your kids are a little bit older, maybe when you're dealing with the
Yeah,
transitions and education and stuff like that, then we can kind of, I think it would be helpful for parents who are going through the same thing to just hear a relatable story. So
yeah.
thank you so much.
Thank you very much.